I want to talk now a little bit about that with Brendan O'Neill, who's the chief political writer of Spike. But before that, I want to bring you and talk about the news as well about Dr Rahmeh Aladwan, who has been arrested earlier today. A video circulating of her being arrested. This is someone who's put some really vile and horrible things into the public domain. This is the video of her arrest.
You're under arrest for 4 offences: malicious communications ×3 and for inciting racial hatred. On the 21st of July, you gave a speech which amounts to calls for the eradication of Israel and implied support for all those involved in armed resistance against Israel.
So the audio on that obviously not great, but the Metropolitan Police have been looking into this, and they have told us, they've given us a statement saying on the morning, well this morning, Tuesday the 21st of October, officers arrested a 31-year-old woman at an address in South Gloucestershire. The woman was arrested on suspicion of misusing a public communications network, sending malicious communications and stirring up racial hatred. The arrest relates to an ongoing investigation led by the Met's Public Order Crime Team into allegations comments made at a protest online in recent months were grossly offensive and anti-Semitic in nature. She remains in custody. Well, let's just take a look at some of the vile posts that this doctor has uploaded.
Overall picture is that this is the battle for liberation. The neighbouring Arab countries let Gaza and the resistance down by not joining them after October the 7th. The world has let Gaza and the resistance down by not only failing to stop this immoral, depraved, psychopathic occupier by means of military intervention or sanctions, but by continuing to supply it with weapons, political cover, and extremely biased media coverage.
One of the milder things she said. Let's speak to Brendan O'Neill, who's the chief political writer at Spike. The arrest has happened. She remains in custody. What do you think, Brendan?
It's sickening what she said. Absolutely sickening. You know, this is a doctor who has said things like she has talked about Jewish supremacy. She referred to one hospital as a cesspit of Jewish supremacy. She has praised the men who carried out 7th of October, the worst attack on the Jews since the Holocaust. She says that the Holocaust itself is a kind of fabricated tale of victimhood. These are obnoxious and racist comments. But you know what shocks me even more than this one doctor is the fact that anti-Semitism seems to be rife in the NHS. There have been hundreds of complaints since 7th of October aimed at more than 100 doctors who are accused or suspected of saying anti-Semitic things. And what I find really remarkable is that if the Metropolitan Police are found to make a joke about women or to make a joke about homosexuals or whatever it might be, they are instantly called institutionally misogynistic, institutionally homophobic. Why is no one on the left, why are no anti-racists saying that the NHS is institutionally anti-Semitic? Because it seems to have a profound problem with Jew hatred in its ranks.
This doctor said, I don't condemn Hamas, I don't condemn the 7th of October, I don't condemn armed resistance to occupation, I condemn Israel. However, on the 7th of October this year, of course 2 years on since the horrendous attacks of mass murder, rape, burning, hostage taken by Hamas, she tweeted, 7th of October, the day Israel was humiliated, their supremacy shattered at the hands of the children they forced out of their homes, the children who watched foreign Jews execute their loved ones, rape their land and live on their stolen soil. I mean, she's just an awful person. I hope the full force of the law is brought to her. We will see what happens. Also, within the last little while, we have seen Louis Theroux has interviewed Pascal Robinson Foster of Bob Vylan, and this is what the encounter brought to light.
You stand by the chant, and would you chant that on stage now?
Oh yeah, like what if I was to go on Glastonbury again tomorrow? Yeah, I would do it again. I'm not regretful of it. I'm not regretful of it. I'd do it again tomorrow, twice on Sundays. I'm not regretful of it at all. Like the subsequent backlash that I've faced, it's minimal. It's minimal compared to what people in Palestine are going through. And they're the people that I'm doing it for, they're the people that I'm being vocal for. Then what is there to regret?
That's Pascal Robinson Foster there of Bob Vylan, the person who went during a performance in Glastonbury and said death, death to the IDF. He also lied about that, saying that he was only talking about the institution and not the people. Previously, a few weeks previously, he had said specifically about the soldiers of the IDF. He also repeated the anti-Semitic slur from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, which is anti-Semitic, despite what Sir Sadiq Khan would have you believe. I mean, even on Somerset Police, we've asked them again on a couple of occasions today. They haven't told us where this investigation is. Really, blatantly, I believe they're just running the clock down on this. I think they're going to say, it's been 6 months, we can't charge, there's nothing to charge, therefore he gets away with it. And he's done horribly anti-Semitic, vile, insightful things. I believe, in my strongly held personal belief, that he has done this on a number of occasions, and there is no accountability for him. Brendan.
You know, it's the impunity that all these people have enjoyed that really, really worries me. That goes for doctors in the NHS who got away with it for months, in fact, for 2 years, with saying some of the most obnoxious racist things one can imagine. And it's the reason that Bob Vylan is still swanning around and still being praised, in fact, by the left, by radicals on the internet, still, you know,
well, he said as well that within that podcast that there were BBC staff members, he alleges, who said that he had done a wonderful performance and had praised him for his performance.
I would not be surprised at all if that was true. And, you know, the thing is, death to the IDF is an anti-Semitic chant. There is no question about that. Everyone knows that the majority of soldiers in the IDF are Jewish. Everyone knows that if you were to dismantle the IDF, that would lead to the instant destruction of the Jewish state by its anti-Semitic enemies around its borders. Everyone knows it would lead to untold death and expulsion for the Jews of the Middle East. We all know this. We all know that it's an open call for the destruction of the Jewish homeland. And the thing is that death to the IDF is basically the rallying cry of Hamas itself. It's certainly what Hamas thinks when it is taking action in Gaza. Whether it says it or not is a different question. It's probably too busy saying Allahu Akbar. But, you know, people like Bob Vylan and all those privileged fans who were chanting along with him at Glastonbury, they fancy themselves as anti-fascists. They think they are anti-racist. They think they are the good people. And yet they are basically joining in with the chanting and the sloganeering of a neo-fascist militia that carried out the worst attack on Jews since the Holocaust. These people haven't got an anti-racist bone in their body.
Let's talk about the rape gangs inquiry, and we've heard from Jess Phillips, the relevant minister, Home Office minister. Let's hear again what she has been saying in the House of Commons earlier today.
The government remains resolute in delivering Baroness Casey's recommendations following her national audit into group-based child sexual exploitation and abuse. These crimes committed by grooming gangs are among the most horrific imaginable, and her report exposed over a decade of institutional inaction, and we are determined to ensure such failures are never repeated.
Jess Phillips there, the Home Office Minister. Well, the Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Philp, responded.
This scandal arose because young, mainly white girls were systematically gang raped, and this was covered up by those in authority because the perpetrators were mainly of Pakistani origin. So it's all the more shocking that when calls for a national inquiry became public in January, the Prime Minister smeared campaigners as jumping on a far-right bandwagon. Comments like that are a disgrace and are what led to this scandal being covered up in the first place. Months later, just 2 days before facing a vote in Parliament, the government finally agreed to the inquiry. But it's clear the government never wanted this inquiry, they were forced into it. Perhaps that is why, months later, the government has said nothing substantive publicly, and their inquiry is descending into chaos.
Chris Philp there, the Shadow Home Secretary. We've seen these people, these victims who are advising the inquiry. 3 of them have gone. One of the potential chairwomen of it has pulled out as well. 2 of them, actually. Brendan, is this all falling apart before it started?
It is falling apart, and we all know why. It's because the establishment just cannot get real about what happened to these white working class girls at the hands of mostly Pakistani Muslim gangs. It just doesn't want to confront this question. For years and years, it ignored this question. And in fact, it's very safe to say now that girls were assaulted and raped because of the silence of the establishment, because the police and social services and politicians looked the other way. These girls were essentially sacrificed at the altar of multiculturalism. Their safety, their dignity were seen as less important than preserving political correctness, preserving the ideology of multiculturalism. And even now, even after promising to get a national inquiry together, still the inquiry feels like it's going to be a stitch-up. It just doesn't want to get to the heart of the truth, which is that there was a racial, religious dynamic to this abuse in particular, and that needs to be explored. And, you know, maybe I'm being ungenerous here, but when I hear Jess Phillips talk about grooming gangs, she always sounds so weary and bored.
You're not the first person who's made that point. I mean, just the point you made a second ago, just in regard to the racial element of this. Louise Casey, Baroness Casey, was absolutely clear in her review of this. That is fundamentally at the centre of this. Surely an inquiry will have to properly look at that.
It has to. Otherwise, there's no point whatsoever. And people always say, what about other forms of child abuse? And what about child abuse within families, including white families? Look, no one doubts that there are all kinds of child abuse. The reason this is specific, the reason this is important to inquire on its own terms, is because it was ignored for so long, is because it was brushed under the carpet. These girls were treated like muck by the establishment. Yeah. They were basically handed over to these gangs. That's why we need an inquiry into how that happened and how we can make sure it never happens again.
Speaking of inquiries, Boris Johnson has been giving evidence to the COVID inquiry today. He has essentially said that he thinks lockdowns perhaps went too far in regard to children and schools closing. Let's just see a clip of what he has been saying.
It was obvious that there had to be consideration of closing schools. I was very much hoping that we wouldn't have to close schools. I thought it was a nightmare idea.
What do you think of what the former Prime Minister has been saying, Brendan?
You know, if it now suddenly becomes acceptable to make critical comments about lockdown, I'm going to lose my rag. Because I remember very well when lockdown was happening, in the run-up to it, during it, and after it, it was very difficult to raise these critical points. You would be written off as a granny killer. I myself was subjected to a pretty vicious Twitter hunt, or whatever we call them in those days, because I raised critical points about lockdown. Lots of people were, in fact. There was a real culture of censorship around that issue. It was really hard to have an open, honest, frank discussion about whether this was the right thing to do, especially in relation to children, especially in relation to schools. It was disastrous. The impact that that policy had on kids' development was disastrous. And of course, it impacted on working class kids and poor kids more than any others, because middle class kids tend to live in nicer, bigger houses. Their parents have more time to focus on their educational needs. Working class kids went under the radar. No one gave a damn about them. So I hope we have the honest discussion that we should have been having 5 years ago. It's better late than never, I guess. But politicians like Boris Johnson himself have got to answer for the decisions that they made.
Brendan, thank you. That's Brendan O'Neill, the chief political writer at Spike, joining us.